Bet the Board.
What do you mean you don't bet? I mean, I don't bet. You know, I don't gamble. I don't. I never have, and I never will. Yeah, right. I'll bet you $20 I can get you gambling before the end of the day.
You owe me 15 grand, pal.
Pay him. Pay that man his money.
It's the Bet the Board podcast.
God likes me. He really, really likes me.
In the end, I wound up right back where I started. I could still pick winners, and I could still make money for all kinds of people back home. And why mess up a good thing?
Here's Payne Insider and Todd Furman.
Welcome into the Bet the Board podcast, powered by FanDuel. NFL Week 6, although we just feel like we put a bow on NFL Week 5 with Tuesday Night Football. I'm your host, Todd Furman, joined as always by my esteemed colleague and co-host of the one, the only Payne Insider.
We just have to be thankful that we have football. The schedule getting all disarrayed and having weird games on unusual nights, we just got to be happy about it. But yes, Tuesday Night Football was interesting. I don't mind it. Now we're without a Thursday game, and then we got the double dip Monday, so schedule's a little out of whack here.
Yeah, things get a little bit squirrely. Of course, the double dip on Monday night, the marquee matchup, so to speak, Dallas and Arizona, I guess, theoretically in prime time. But the better game, Kansas City and Buffalo. We'll preview both of those games in detail on Monday's podcast. So if you're looking for those today, you're not going to find them. John Sheeran will join us later in the show to talk about how the book has performed thus far. We'll get his take on Alabama, Georgia, as I know we didn't get to it yesterday on the college football podcast because the news broke so late in the day. And Payne, we almost had a scare earlier this morning that we were going to be without an NFL matchup this weekend with Atlanta and Minnesota, but it does look like it was a bit of a false alarm.
So one, you managed to squeeze in your beloved college football in the NFL podcast, which you love to routinely do.
Hey, that's an NFL showcase type game between Alabama and Georgia. It'd be one thing if I was trying to squeeze in UTSA and Army over here.
You did something last week, too. That I can't remember what it was, but you had to talk college football last week on the NFL podcast. Like, there's going to be a mandate here pretty soon that, like, the big boy football, that's for big boy football day. And the little guy football, like, that doesn't cross-sect. It doesn't merge. We're going to get there one day.
The little guy football. Well, I'll just wait till I start interjecting hockey and baseball and everything else. Then we'll see how pissed off you really get.
Oh. What were you asking me now?
I said at least we're going to get the Falcons and Vikings, or so it appears on the surface.
There we go. Happy about that. Let's just put it that way. Would love to see that game play out. So there we go. We reopened. Where did we reopen there? Minnesota -4 and 54.5.
Yep, more or less the numbers that are painted across the board. FanDuel right in that mix as well.
Perfect. Yeah, let's see who else opens, but it sounds like a positive that it only appears that Marlon Davidson infected coaches at this point.
One thing I did want to ask, Payne, and of course we normally obviously recap what we saw week 5 on Monday. Did you see anything Tuesday night between the Bills and Titans that surprised you at all?
Wasn't in love with the Bills' offensive game plan. Little too run happy. I get it. We want to test a defense that hasn't shown an ability to be the most stout against the run, and now they're without Jeffrey Simmons, the stalwart in the middle there. So I get it. I just didn't love all the running initially from Buffalo, and I know a lot of people are raving about how good they were on third downs. The goal isn't to be fantastic on third down. It's to bypass third down. That's your ultimate goal there. But you got to give Mike Vrabel credit, and I know we've been a little bit critical of him because his defenses have underachieved there. But he was without Adoree Jackson again. He was without Fulton, 2 of his top cover corners. And he really played, a zone defense that gave Josh Allen some trouble, made him think, didn't allow him to just zip the ball out and have Dayball basically do everything for him pre-snap, to where everything post-snap was extremely easy. So he had to think, he had to methodically move the Bills' offense down the field. That was the only thing that scared me a little bit. It looked like, again, the Titans did take some sharp action. Apparently they were pissed off that everyone was ragging on them about not following protocol. That's an interesting story. The NFL basically covered for them throughout that telecast. Said, hey, they did nothing wrong. But we got a real game effort there from the Titans, and I continue to not really know what the heck that group is. Certainly the line this week is interesting if Tennessee was that fantastic of a ball club. I'm not sure they're laying just 3 here. So I just don't know what to make of the Tennessee Titans. It's a tough team for me to gauge, having seen Ryan Tannehill play virtually every snap of his career, and what we're witnessing now. A lot of credit certainly deserved of Arthur Smith and potentially where he might end up at the next stop, because what he's doing right now probably earns him some interviews this offseason.
Has created the Ryan Tannehill resurgence, the over machine during the regular season since he took the reins in Tennessee. But as you mentioned, we'll see exactly how they handle prosperity when the Houston Texans come a-calling on Sunday. Unfortunately for those Titans and Texans fans, that's not one of the marquee games that we'll be breaking down on this very show. But a game we will be breaking down will be taking place in Charlotte, where the Carolina Panthers will welcome in the Chicago Bears. We're looking at Carolina, a 1.5-point favorite at FanDuel. Total on this game got touched up a little bit this morning. We see that number sitting at 43.5. And Payne, we know that the Panthers had a brief interruption this week as they had to go through a little bit of COVID protocol to be proactive there. Meanwhile, we look at the Chicago Bears. They once again find a way to rally from a double-digit deficit, this time after falling behind 13-0 in the first half against the Bucs. They now join 7 other NFL teams with 3 victories in the first 5 games after trailing by 10 or more, according to the Elias Sports Bureau. Payne, let's not sugarcoat it. Good teams don't typically fall behind by double digits, but the Bears have shown a little bit of resilience getting these W's. How do they match up offensively against the Carolina defense that could be a little bit undermanned, with Kejuan Short being lost for the season?
That's both the interesting and potentially annoying part, is we don't believe Chicago is as good as the 4-1 record. But now that they're there and they potentially have an upgrade at quarterback and the defense looks like it's good, we might actually see them improve a little bit at a time where some guys potentially are thinking about fading them. So that could be a little bit annoying, although we did see some money on Chicago come in this week, potentially some of it COVID related. But to me, when I look at the Bears offense, you would hope with a few extra days of prep that the offense improves a little bit. I'm interested to see if Foles and the Bears offense looks a little different, if there's a little more cohesion, maybe, heck, even an expanded playbook, a few new wrinkles, something that, you couldn't really implement in a 3-day turnaround between Foles' first and second start against the Bucs on Thursday night. And I think if you are going glass half full, Todd, because I know you got a lot of Bears buddies that listen to this, or, if you're potentially not a believer or you're on the fence about Foles, his first 2 starts have been against the Colts and Bucs. Those defenses are number 1 and number 2 in defensive efficiency. Carolina this week is 23rd. So, you have extra prep time. It's a step down in class for Foles and the Chicago Bears offense. Hopefully, you show out here. You also have a banged-up Carolina defense. Kejuan Short was trying to play through some injuries, but he's officially out for the season now. Brian Burns, Gross Matos, haven't practiced yet. You have your lead corner, and Dante Jackson was limited at practice. Eli Apple, also limited at practice. So we're going to have to monitor some of those situations. But a few, key cogs on the Panthers defense are going to either be out for this one or playing at far less than 100%. I think when you look at Chicago's attack this week, it probably has a chance to be pretty balanced. Carolina 29th in defensive rush efficiency could mean a decent game here for David Montgomery. And if you look at his snap count, it's been really high the last 2 games, 82% or more in terms of snap share once Tariq Cohen has gone out. The other interesting thing here is Montgomery's running a ton of routes right now, 30 routes in each of the last 2 games. He's been targeted 14 times on those 30 routes. And if you look at the Panthers defense, they've given up a league-high 43 receptions to running backs, 3rd most yards to running backs through the air as well. So, to me, there's some real advantages for the Bears offense this week, Todd. If we, see an uptick in production, I think we might have to believe that Chicago is trending towards being a pretty formidable team. Right, knowing that, again, that the 4-1 record to this point is a bit fugazi.
Yeah, well, the Bears are going to have to find a way to actually score a single point in the third quarter if we're going to consider this team halfway decent. One of the bigger statistical anomalies for a team that's 4-1 so far this season. And we could go through a laundry list of some of the Bears' offensive metrics that are downright disgusting to look at, but the reality of it is they've been able to dodge that bullet so far. and perform to a pretty good record. Meanwhile, on the other side of the ball, Payne, when you look at this Carolina Panthers team, they've been underdogs in all 5 games so far this season. Assuming they close as a favorite here, this will be a new role for them. 4 of their 5 games have been decided by a touchdown or less. And while I say this a little bit tongue-in-cheek, if you're the Carolina Panthers, it's Christian McCaffrey who? Mike Davis has been outstanding leading the charge, and we're seeing Teddy Bridgewater on the same page with Robbie Anderson and DJ Moore, providing more than a formidable passing attack early on in the reuniting relationship with Joe Brady as his offensive coordinator.
So there's lots of things that are sending my mind awry here. Is this the Mike Davis revenge game?
I mean, clearly we all know that Mike Davis has had the Bears circled ever since this schedule was handed out. We know this.
The other thing here is it seems like we talk about the Bears every single week. So I think all your buddies back home are like paying you off to get me to talk about these damn games.
Well, we talk about we talk about teams with winning records, and whether we like the Bears or not, it's one of the few matchups this weekend where 2 winning teams are actually playing each other.
After you sent me the game to talk about, I immediately kind of said, what the F here? And then I started digging into it, and I'm like, you picked a good game, Todd. I didn't tell you that, but, mentally I said that.
Yeah, mentally.
So
we all keep that under wraps, as if it takes a degree from Harvard or advanced analytical analysis to figure out what games we're going to try and break down on the podcast when the NFL offers a slate this piss poor.
So, for me, there's some real intrigue here. I'm trying to figure out how good the 2 teams are. And you're looking at Carolina's offense with Joe Brady and Teddy Bridgewater, and I have to tell you, it's come together better and quicker than I thought it could have, or I was kind of hoping for, especially when you factor in the shortened off season. And then you mentioned your top weapon and McCaffrey goes down, and yet we're looking at a Panthers offense that's 9th in overall offensive efficiency. So Joe Brady, again, for the 2nd year in a row, has been worth basically every single penny. Now, the schedule here of defenses Carolina's played has been below average. And the only other top 5 defense Carolina's faced was Tampa Bay. And the Panthers were held scoreless the first 37 minutes of that game, 3.9 yards per play in the first half of that game. Then they're down like 21 midway through the 3rd quarter, and the Panthers offense kind of, started to rally a little bit. But I think that's probably a good indicator, because Chicago's the only other defense Carolina has faced that's in this same weight class, we'll call it, as Tampa Bay's. Similar for Chicago's defense here, though. They faced the 6th easiest schedule of offenses, so it is a pretty nice step up here for them as well. The difference being is at least we have some history on this Chicago defense, right? They're playing to form over the last few seasons. Khalil Mack finally looked healthy for the first time all season last Thursday's ragdolling guys. He's getting to the quarterback again. He looks like himself, so that's a positive. The 2 huge factors for me on this side of the matchup that I think probably play a huge role not only in determining who kind of has the edge here, but in the game overall. The first one is Carolina's offense. It operates from 3 wide sets 55% of the time. That's their base formation. Carolina hasn't used another formation more than 16% of snaps. And right now, the Bears defense, they've allowed only 36% of passes from 3 wide sets to great successful. Quarterbacks have a 63 passer rating throwing from 3 wide sets against the Bears. 0 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. So something's going to have to give there a little bit. The other thing here for Carolina is, as good as the offense has been, they've struggled to finish drives. The Panthers have gotten into the red zone a bunch, but when they get there, just 27th in the league in converting for touchdowns. You have a Bears defense right now allowing opponents to convert red zone trips to touchdowns at a 36% clip. That's the lowest rate in the league. So probably speaks a little bit, Todd, to your point initially at the top on, we've seen a little under money come in here at 45 this morning.
Yeah, if Carolina wants to figure out what to do once they get in the red zone, encourage them to watch the tape of the Bears-Colts game and do the exact opposite of what Frank Reich tried to do with Phillip Rivers there. But should be a good game as we figure out which of these teams is for real, and if the Bears can notch their 5th victory or Carolina can move 2 games over 500, a pretty impressive accomplishment for a team whose win total closed widely right around 5.5 leading up to the season. From 2 teams that we think are going to be decent to 2 teams that maybe we really believe are pretty decent. That, of course, the showdown in the AFC North this weekend, and ironically enough, it's a showdown that doesn't involve the Baltimore Ravens, but rather the Pittsburgh Steelers will welcome in the Cleveland Browns. And you're looking at Pittsburgh, a 3-point favorite at FanDuel. Total in this game, 51, Payne. And when you look at the Browns, they've won 4 out of 5 games for the second time in the last 40 years. They're seeking their first 5-game win streak since 1994. I think you were about 6 years old back then. Meanwhile, you look at the Steelers, they've only started 5-0 once back in 1978. And for those fans of the black and gold, they went on to win the Super Bowl in that fateful season. And as far as trends are concerned between these two teams, well, if Mike Tomlin has owned one team more than Cleveland, I'd beg of you to point them out because he's gone 21-4-1 since taking over as head coach back in 2007. But I think we'll start with the Steelers' offense against the Browns' defense, Payne. And Chase Claypool burst on the scene, a 4-touchdown explosion last weekend. And might be able to keep some of that momentum going against the Browns' defense that still has plenty of question marks in the defensive backfield, despite what we've seen out of Myles Garrett on the defensive line.
Yeah, you led me perfectly there because immediately the thing that was kind of blinking when I got to this side of the matchup was how the Browns' defense, and specifically their secondary, would hold up against Big Ben and now this, what seems to be a fantastic slew of weapons. You know, we're watching Big Ben, I think, incrementally get better each week as he rounds into form a little. You're looking at Ben right now grading out the 12th best passer in the NFL. He's got the shiny new toy in Chase Claypool to pair with guys like Juju and Deontay and even Ebron. The versatility that Chase Claypool showed last week, not just running the ball, but and potentially creating these run after the catch situations. But really, if you look, Claypool lined up all over the field. Like, Philly didn't know where Claypool was going to be down to down. So I think that provides another wrinkle for Pittsburgh's offense. When I watched Chase Claypool at Notre Dame, it just felt like he was this guy who would have go routes down the sidelines. He would out-leap people, and he was great in terms of contested catches. But he is really showing that he can do multiple things for the Steelers offense. So it's tough to kind of gauge where they're at because I think he takes their offense to another level. So you kind of have to project ahead a little bit here. The other interesting thing is when you talk about, this matchup of the Steelers pass offense versus the Browns pass defense, right now, the Steelers are throwing the ball roughly 75% of the time from 3 wide sets. Cleveland obviously hasn't been great defending passes from 11 because they are beat up in the secondary. Doesn't appear like Greedy Williams is returning anytime soon, unfortunately. It looks like they botched that medical thing in Cleveland there. They're trying to bring him back a little bit, but now he's got lost feeling in his arm. So it'll be interesting to see what goes on there. But you're looking at a Browns defense that's 23rd in passing success rate, and they face the 3rd easiest schedule of passing offenses. The only reason why the Browns right now are middle of the pack in defensive pass efficiency is because Joe Woods. Not only is he a fantastic DB coach, something that he prides himself in, but he's been pretty good as a defensive coordinator early on as well. But he's choosing to play a style of defense that limits the big play, that tries to keep everything in front because he knows he doesn't have the horses at this point in the secondary to play man and to play press. So he's really trying to keep things in front, and that's limited the amount of explosive plays against that Cleveland secondary. But I think Pittsburgh is going to be a little bit, of a different animal here with their weapons. This is far and away the toughest pass offense the Browns have faced, past even Juju, right? And Claypool and Deontay if he returns from the back injury, but it does look like that's going to be the case. Cleveland's also struggled defending tight ends. They've struggled defending running backs, catching the ball. So past even the big 3 receivers.
Sounds like a bit of a problem if you struggle defending wide receivers, tight ends, and running backs.
Yeah, it hasn't been good in that regard, right? So I think you probably see a nice little mix of Ebron and Connor catching it and being real contributors in the pass game as well, Todd.
What you make of the injuries along the Steelers' offensive line, knowing that Myles Garrett has been on an absolute tear? We know about the story last year when he decided to turn a helmet into a weapon and try and pound Mason Rudolph into next Tuesday. Since entering the league, Garrett has lived up to his number 1 overall draft pick status, 36.5 sacks, 9 forced fumbles, 75 quarterback hits, 35 tackles for loss, and we've seen him on full display this year, looking reinvigorated as the most dominant edge rusher probably in the entire league.
No question. And listen, he's the one that's generating most of the pressure, so it's a guy that you have to pay extra attention to, whether you're going to have your backs help and chip on that side, or that's where you're going to delegate your tight ends to help in pass protection. But as a whole, Cleveland is still below average in pressure rate as a team. to your question about the offensive line members, I don't really know anything more than what's been publicly dispersed at this point. And we record these things first thing Monday morning, obviously, so we only have Wednesday's practice to report to go by. Later today is the bigger test for some of these players. So a lot of the times you're looking at Wednesdays being planned days of rest, and it sounds like that's the case for Juju. Pouncey has a foot issue that they claim isn't all that serious. The reports came back clean. Tomlin sounded optimistic for him. Sounded optimistic for Deontay as well. He sounded optimistic for DeCastro. So, we'll have to monitor that situation. Long term, you also have Stefan Wisniewski that has returned from the IR. They'll have 21 days to make him active, whether that's this week in a backup or starter's role. If DeCastro can't go, we'll see. But he's at least progressing nicely and will be on his way, and I think will probably provide some nice support to that O-line.
And I think it's going to be interesting because you look at those sides of the ball, and while we have plenty of questions about the Cleveland defense, the Steelers offense, as you mentioned, rounding into form, I think the other side of the ball becomes even that much more fascinating with a Browns offense that's clicking right now. Scored 30-plus points in 4 straight games for the first time since 1968. Kevin Stefanski's ground and pound approach has really helped Baker Mayfield immensely. Had his most prolific passing day in the win last weekend against the Indianapolis Colts. But Payne, I think a lot of us expected this Steelers defense to be very good coming into the season, kind of picking up where they left off. But they haven't faced offenses that, for the most part, have a real pulse. And the first time they were tested last week, they made Travis Fulgham look like the second coming of Mike Quick, Jerry Rice, and Randy Moss all rolled into one when it's a 10-catch performance and more than 150 yards against the Steelers secondary.
Doug Peterson's got to see what he has there. I don't think you knock Fulgham out of the lineup if Deshaun and Elshon return. I think you got to see what you have in that kid and then work the other guys along as well. Don't ruin that kid's snap count. So it'll be interesting to see there what the Eagles have. But you kind of hit this perfectly. And the first and I guess most glaring thing that jumped out at me when breaking down this side of the ball was the schedule dichotomy. Cleveland's offense has faced the very hardest schedule of opposing defenses, and the Pittsburgh Steelers have gone against the very easiest schedule of opposing offenses. And, I get it. You can only play who's on your schedule, but digging into things like this is how you're going to find some value. Week 1, you look, it's the Giants and Daniel Jones. They have some beat-up weapons outside. Week 2, it's Denver and Drew Lock, and then some Jeff Driscoll sprinkled in there. Week 3, it's a struggling Houston offense that had a lead in that game, and then they just fired their offensive-minded head coach. So you get how they were performing offensively, and then Carson Wentz and a banged-up receiver group last week. So I get it. It's this extremely small sample of just 4 data points, but Pittsburgh's defense has faced a schedule that's easier than last season, and so far they've performed dramatically worse. I think there's a few things to look at here, but honestly, the battle up front is the one that matters most. The strength of the Steelers' defense right now is their defensive line. They do a good job getting pressure, still number 1 in pressure rate, getting to quarterbacks on 41% of dropbacks. No one else in the NFL, Todd, is above 31%. If you look, it's not a fluke either, because Pittsburgh is number 2 in pass rush win rate. So each of the individual guys along that defensive line are winning their one-on-one battles consistently. So they get after your quarterback. You're also looking at a defense right now that's number 1 in adjusted line yards defensively, and it's why they're also number 1 in rushing success rate defense. And you take it a step further, 28% of running plays against Pittsburgh have either lost or gained no yards. But again, Pittsburgh's played the second easiest schedule of run offenses. So that's going to change a little bit here. You just wonder if this edge up front that Pittsburgh has just about any time they step on the field gets, negated a touch in this matchup, because you're looking at Cleveland. What a story, right? Like, they struggled last year up front. They were adamant about fixing their offensive line this offseason. It was basically priority 1, 2, and 3. And you're looking through 5 weeks, the Browns' offensive line, number 1 in creating room for its running backs, number 2 in pass block win rate, and that's come against a top 10 schedule of pass rush defenses. So this will be, the first offensive line that has the chance to at least, stifle Pittsburgh a little bit. schedule dichotomy and matchup is why we have seen early money come in on Cleveland, along with some of those question marks and injuries that we see from Pittsburgh. But I think a lot of those guys are going to come back. But when you look at Kevin Stefanski, I think he has been fantastic. And I think you have to really like, to this point, how sophisticated the offense has looked. You know, we touched on this last week, Todd, right? Everyone just thinks the Browns only are this run-first offense. And I just think it's a big mistake to evaluate them that way. And if you look last week in the first half against the Colts defense on early downs, right, knowing that you didn't have Nick Chubb and the ground game wasn't, just rolling and hitting on all cylinders, Stefanski chose to pass on early downs in the first half at a 70% clip. So he's no dummy, right? Like, he wants to run, but he's not going to just do it and sacrifice the offense if it isn't very efficient. And so, I think Stefanski obviously is going to test the Steelers on the ground, see if the rush numbers are as real as they seem, or if it's been basically, because of the schedule. But I also think you're going to see Stefanski attack through the air on early downs. Have Baker, take some intermediate to deep shots to open up this defense. There's no reason not to attack the Steelers deep down the field with OBJ a few times. And if you look, Pittsburgh's defense, they've been really good down to down, getting stops, getting teams off the field. But if you look, despite being third in defensive pass efficiency and number one in pressure rate, as I said earlier, the Steelers are 24th in explosive pass defense, and they've played absolutely nobody. So I think you want to test them deep a little bit, see if you can open up that defense. Maybe it helps get the ground game going a little bit as well. And to me, let's kind of wrap this up and put a bow tie on it here. You're going to know pretty early, I think, if Cleveland can be balanced, if their offensive line can hold up and be as good as the metrics indicate to stalemate the best part of Pittsburgh's defense. I think Stefanski will take an early shot or two. Hopefully he's aggressive with first down passing. If those things aren't happening and Baker is under duress, it's not going to work well for Cleveland's offense, because we know at this point Baker has some trouble under pressure. 3-1 interception to touchdown ratio and a 31 passer rating when pressured for Baker Mayfield. So the biggest key to this game is, can that Browns offensive line, Todd, hold up against the Steelers in the trenches?
We'll find out. It's been a one-sided rivalry, as we've mentioned. If Cleveland is ready to make the next step and be considered formidable, not just as a playoff team this year, but a legitimate threat to win the AFC North, it'll be on full display this coming Sunday. Last thing I did want to ask you about in this game, Payne, before we go to the marquee matchup of Sunday afternoon, Baker Mayfield. We know he was X-rayed after Sunday's games dealing with ribs. Those results came back negative. How concerned are you about his ability to take hits, since there's really not a whole heck of a lot you can do to protect ribs other than putting on an additional flak jacket, and he will be under duress right from the opening snap against his Steelers defense?
Hopefully he's not, right? That's going to be the key. Now, last week when he got hit, he returned. The passes didn't look as crisp. Obviously, he is battling through, a touch of an injury, but it doesn't seem to be a big concern based upon the money that is coming into the market on Cleveland. And I don't think there's a chance in hell that he misses this game. So I think it's full steam ahead for Baker. Tough guy, obviously. And, if he doesn't go,
Case Keenum, baby. Let's go.
I don't think there is that much of a drop-off. And I'm not just saying that because, I'm trying to be optimistic here. But you can roll the tape on the AFC preview podcast of this North Division. And I had kind of made a point to say that during camp, Case Keenum, with the number 2 offense, looked better against the Browns' number 1 defense than did Baker Mayfield rolling with the ones against the Browns' number 2 defense. So I don't think there's that dramatic of a drop-off if Baker gets hit here early and he has to leave, and it's what the hell's his name? I was losing my mind here. We just talked about
Case Keenum, baby.
Case Keenum. Jesus, I just said his name.
Let's go. Get it together, Payne.
I'm getting
Come
old.
on.
Well, I haven't eaten yet this morning. And so that's kind of where we're at. We're now at 11 a.m. I need to get some fuel in the system. So, yeah, Case Keenum, I don't think is a big drop-off here. I really don't. It might, in fact, be not just level, but due to the familiarity with this system of Kevin Stefanski's having been in Minnesota with him, dare I say, may potentially be better.
Well, we'll find out. We'll see if it's as early as this week. But Baker Mayfield, by all accounts, expected to be the starter. We'll see if that changes or if he's able to complete the game under duress from that Steelers defensive line. Into the afternoon, Payne, we'll see the Packers fresh off of a bye week where Aaron Rodgers had some pretty strong words about what it meant for him staying in Green Bay to preserve COVID protocol during this unusual 2020 season. You're looking at Green Bay, a 1-point road favorite down there in Tampa. Total in this game, 54.5 at FanDuel. Third time that Brady and Rodgers will do battle as starting quarterbacks. The Packers put their longest regular season winning streak in the league on the line at 9 games. And I guess when you look at this particular spot, Matt LaFleur has done more than answered the bell in his second season as a head coach. I know we were overly critical last year about how his teams were ill-equipped to adjust after the opening script wore off. Well, that hasn't quite been the case. Green Bay's offense has been as dynamic as any in the entire league, but they've also seen things drop off defensively. Meanwhile, on the other side of the ball, Tampa's offense, it operates in fits and spurts, hasn't been completely healthy, and we'll get into some of the specifics there. But let's start with the Green Bay Packers offensive attack against the Bucs defense, who, as we mentioned on Monday, will be down one of their biggest bodies on the defensive line in Vita Vea. If you're Green Bay, you've had 2 weeks to prepare. How are you going about attacking Tampa other than letting Aaron Rodgers throw it 65 times?
Yeah, just chuck. Just chuck.
It's my take, baby. Just get out there and chuck and duck. 5 wide receivers. I don't care what 5 they are.
This is the best offense that Tampa Bay is going to face or has faced to this point in the season. And this is the best defense the Packers have played so far. So a step up in class for both sides, strength versus strength. Something has to give, obviously. I think when you look at the ground attack, that's probably the best place to start. It's been extremely explosive for the Packers. When you have a guy like Aaron Jones, you just need to feed him the ball as much as you can. I still don't get that part of things from LaFleur. I get that you want to preserve him a little bit, but he's just too dynamic to only touch the ball the amount of times he is right now. But you're looking, the Packers have the 4th most explosive ground game. Their running backs for the Packers are averaging 210 yards from scrimmage. That's most in the NFL. We know Tampa has been extremely stout stopping the run since Todd Bowles took over as DC. The Bucs are number 1 in explosive run defense, 3rd in defensive rush efficiency. And as you alluded to there on Monday, we talked about the Vita Vea injury and going down with, I believe, the broken ankle. And if you look, Vita Vea led all qualifying Buccaneers linemen in run stop percentage. So we'll have to see if there's this drop off for Tampa in terms of stopping the run there. Certainly a huge blow to their defense. But through the air, I think, is really what's going to be this fun thing to watch here and what determines this side of the ball. Aaron Rodgers, going against a young but super talented Buccaneers secondary. You mentioned Devontae Adams is back for this one. Right now, despite Adams missing 2.5 games, Allen Lazard missing some time, the Packers are still the 2nd most efficient pass attack in the NFL. 4th in explosive passing as well. Again, another strength versus strength. Tampa Bay, 4th in defensive pass efficiency, 3rd in explosive pass defense. This is far and away, the game of the week. And I'm going to help you here. This is Bama offense versus Georgia defense like. I know you like
can't
to
make college football
references.
This is the Thursday NFL podcast, Payne.
So, hopefully this is one of the best matchups of the season right here. But when I dug into this, there's a few important things that probably sway this side of the ball, Todd. I think the one area where, Aaron Rodgers has been human and not Terminator-like is with pressure. Now, the O-line's kept them upright a bunch. Rodgers has only been pressured on 21% of his dropbacks. But when the heat is on, just a 68 passer rating, 55% adjusted completion percentage. Both those marks are outside the top 23 among quarterbacks with at least 2 games played. And I think that's important to mention because Tampa Bay right now, number 1 in pass rush win rate, number 5 in pressure rate. Let's see if they can get to Rodgers because it has impacted him, the little pressure that he has faced this season. A couple other small things here that I think are probably worth mentioning. The first is, let's see if Tampa can handle some of Green Bay's offensive versatility, giving Matt LaFleur more credit than we initially were doing last season. He's had the Packers operate from 11 different formations this season. He hasn't used a single formation more than 36% of snaps. Let's see if that diversity gives the young Bucs secondary a little bit of trouble. The second thing is we know how good Aaron Jones and Jamal Williams are catching balls out of the backfield. They're more than just running backs. If you look, Tampa Bay, despite having what I would classify as 2 all-world linebackers, they've allowed the 4th most completions and 4th most yards to running backs catching the ball. And then the final thing here, Todd, Green Bay, number 2 in red zone blended offense. Tampa Bay 17th in red zone success rate allowed. So a little bit of an edge there for Green Bay once they get into the red zone. We'll see if they can convert some of those trips into touchdowns. Obviously, when you're looking at this line, when you're looking at this number, I made it Tampa Bay -1. So it's not shocking to me to see that they took a little bit of money yesterday at +2.5. Saw one group buy to the 3. Think there's probably, even with this total getting steamed over, I don't know where the line will go from here, but I think probably still if you can sneak in a teaser leg on Tampa, makes some sense before they potentially turn into the favorite at -1 that I believe that they potentially should be here.
Look at you giving line analysis before we even broke down the other side of the ball to talk about Tommy Terrific.
I looked up. I'm looking at the screen here. Now, obviously I think Green Bay is going to move the ball here, and that's partly why the total's gone up as well. And you can lead us into the other side. Sorry for stealing your analysis
all good.
there. I'm sure you're going into the line.
If you think Green Bay is going to move the ball, yet Tampa makes sense as a teaser leg, you believe that Tampa's offense is going to have some success against this Packers defense. And, of course, Tampa has had the emergence of Ronald Jones give them a viable number 1 back for the first time in his career. He rattles off 100-yard games. You'd have to think that Tampa's passing attack, other than O.J. Howard, will be the healthiest it's been in weeks against Green Bay. And meanwhile, Payne, we look at this Green Bay Packers defense, and saying they have room for improvement might be a little bit of an understatement, as they've missed 36 tackles in just 4 games. And it feels like every time that the secondary has a chance to bring a receiver down in space, they seem to miss. Now, the defense should be bolstered by the return of Kenny Clark along their defensive line. But when you look at Green Bay, I mean, their red zone defense has been downright porous for as good as it was last year. And there's a lot of issues that they're seeing on the stop unit. Tom Brady, extra time to prepare. He's become the laughing stock of the league after he forgot how many downs he needed against the Chicago Bears. Imagine you're going to get an inspired effort from Tampa on the offensive side.
By the way, I think this is, for folks out there, if Tom Brady and all he's accomplished can get his balls busted by a bunch of losers and weirdos on the internet, it's one thing to not feel down when you see some negativity come across social media about you. So it's wild to see that, and I think there's a little bit of narrative street here. But to your point, after having a rare brain fart and unluckily having it in prime time in a standalone setting, I think we're absolutely going to see a dialed-in Tom Brady this week. You just know his makeup. He is going to be supremely focused. That is going to eat at him all week long. And I think the other positive here for Tom Brady, and I probably buried the lead, that I do think they're going to have a really good time on offense this week because you have Chris Godwin back. Both Mike Evans and Scotty Miller, who played through injuries on a short week against Chicago, now have 9 and 10 days to heal. This is far and away the best passing offense Green Bay's defense has faced. If you look through 5 weeks, the Packers have played the 8th easiest schedule of passing offenses, the 2nd easiest schedule of explosive passing offenses. So far, taking it one step past that, Green Bay has lucked out not having to play any of these offenses with their number 1 receiving option. If you go back to week 1 against Minnesota, we know Stephon Diggs was traded, wasn't there, and Justin Jefferson really wasn't a thing yet at that point. Week 2, they faced the Lions without Kenny Golladay. Week 3, the Saints without Michael Thomas. Julio Jones in Week 4 hobbled around for 15 snaps before leaving with a hamstring injury. So this Packers defense not only hasn't been good, Todd, but you kind of mentioned this, they haven't played anybody yet with their full complement of weapons. And despite that, Green Bay has one of the worst defenses in the league, 29th in overall defensive efficiency, equally bad against the run and pass. And I think we've talked multiple times since that NFC Championship game last season, the 2 ways to really hurt Green Bay's defense is running the ball, specifically outside zone runs. And we're looking at a Tampa team right now with Ronald Jones that's really coming on. That's 8th in rushing efficiency. 54% of runs have graded successful as well. Lots of that damage on outside of the tackle runs. Now, the return of Kenny Clark may help negate some of that running edge that Tampa Bay has in this spot. The other thing that I kind of uncovered here that kills the Packers defense since the start of last season is passing from heavy sets and using play action. Last year, offenses that used play action really negated the pass rush for the Packers. This season, the Packers pass rush has been non-existent to this point. 30th in pass rush win rate, 30th in pressure rate. And think about that. Green Bay has led, Todd, in every single game for large stretches. That's when the high-priced Smith brothers should be eating, knowing passing downs, passing situations, we get to eat, we get to come after the quarterback. It hasn't been the case. Getting back to the heavy sets a little bit here. We saw Cameron Brate's snap count increase last week. Gronk got going a little bit. Hudson got some work as well. Tampa Bay has operated from 2 tight end sets on roughly 27% of snaps. Tampa has been successful on 53% of their runs, 56% of their passes from 12 formation. Green Bay hasn't showed an ability this season to defend 2 tight end sets. They've allowed 69% of runs to great successful, 67% of passes. They've only sacked the quarterback 1 time all season when the opposing offense uses 2 tight end sets. There are a lot of advantages for this Bucs offense. It's why we've seen the total go from 51.5 out to 55. And then again yesterday, we've seen the Bucs take some money at plus 2.5. One group gobbled that up. So we have seen some sharp money over, some sharp money on the Bucs as well, and it's basically this side of the ball. I think Tom Brady's going to have some real success here. The other thing worth mentioning, Todd, it's been low 40s, mid 40s all week in Green Bay, and I get that the fatigue factor might not play a role as large as it usually would for a team that's coming off the bye, but it's going to be hot, it's going to be humid here in Florida. So I think that might be a little bit of an edge this week as well for Tampa.
Should be one of the marquee games of the weekend, as we know there's only two contests kicking off in that 4 p.m. Eastern time slot. It's the Packers and Bucs and the showdown in your neck of the woods between the Jets and Dolphins that I know you'll be anxiously glued to your TV set trying to figure out what you're going to get from the Jets. And Payne, you know...
That was big for the Dolphins, right? This is, despite old man Fitzpatrick at quarterback...
Chance to get
this
to
is
500,
still
baby!
This is one of the youngest teams in football. I believe might be the very youngest. So if you can get that mental hurdle of playing 500 football, I think it bodes well for the rest of the season for the Dolphins.
Payne, I hate to do this to you and be the bearer of bad news because you don't let me talk about college football on this podcast. Our college football podcast Best Bet officially canceled.
Really?
Yep.
Oof.
Just saw the alert come across. Suboptimal. So it puts a lot more pressure on you to figure out where we're going for our NFL Best Bet investment. Just want to give you a heads up before we get there.
I just saw that. You frazzled me here.
Well, it's a good thing. It's a good thing.
That's why, and I'll be candid with our listeners. I don't really love it at this number, but that's why I was kind of ticked off if the Falcons game got canceled a little bit because we got in on a good number under there at 57 and 56.5.
Well, we'll take advantage there.
This is starting to get frustrating, by the way.
You want to talk about
like the hours we put into these games. Now, again, I'm not complaining because football is better than no football. And
Agreed.
If we had this choice back in late March or early April, we're all taking it. But you put the time into these games that we do, it's kind of a kick in the nuts there.
It does become a little
to earn.
Bit of It does become a bit of little diminishing returns. But I'm going to give you a chance to regroup because it's time to welcome in our weekly guest. He joins us every Thursday here on the Bet the Board podcast, and you, of course, can follow John Sheeran on Twitter. That's at JSheeran, SHEERAN 1981 for all of the late-breaking news. And, John, I have to imagine when you're a man behind the counter come Wednesday morning after 4 underdogs covering prime time, you're kind of like that Vince McMahon meme. You're able to puff out your chest a little bit and know that you get to be the alpha male leading into NFL Week 6.
I think that's fair, Todd. For the first time all season, I've been able to hold my head up in the corridor as we walk past my bosses. So definitely made for a nice change, I won't lie.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at it, Tampa, of course, fails to get there on Thursday night against the Bears, a game where you said that, hey, look, we're going to need the home underdog, and then follow it up Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday. Has to work out well. But before we get into the National Football League, and I know Payne has a bunch of questions, I think the most pressing topic on anyone's mind is the news that we saw break yesterday in college football, where Nick Saban tests positive for COVID. Can you kind of walk us through what that meant to you guys in terms of where the number was, where you move the number to, and if you happen to see any action on that game when it came to the Georgia Bulldogs before some of that intel became public.
Yeah, I mean, look, I didn't see a whole lot of movement. I think, with the avenues that are out there now, and I believe there was actually press at the location in Tuscaloosa when he actually got the positive news. So I think we all got it relatively quickly. I didn't see any major move in Georgia before it happened. In terms of the action on the line, yeah, it was all the way up to -6.5. We kind of liked the spot for Alabama. Thought it was, really good test for Georgia's defense. And then on the other side of the ball, maybe Georgia not the best equipped to take advantage of Alabama. So we were pretty high at -6.5. The line's gone down to 3.5. And I guess two reasons from our perspective. One would be obviously a concern that it may be more of an outbreak than just Saban himself. And then I think second to that is the idea of, how reluctant he is to delegate to his staff. He's in control of everything. I watched his interview last night, and he basically said, we're going to find a way to make sure that I can communicate with the people at the stadium on the day. And obviously, there's still a chance that he gets 3 negatives this morning, tomorrow, and Saturday morning that allows him to be on the sideline. But I think that's probably unlikely now. So we've taken a bit of an evasive action because we just feel like he's probably a bit of an isolated incident. I think in general, people may overreact to these things, but maybe not in this case.
Payne, wanted to get your take on this real quick, not to put you on the spot. No, we didn't get a chance to break it down on the college football edition of Bet the Board because the news broke so late in the day. When you talk about head coaches, even one as accomplished as Nick Saban, were you surprised to see a full field goal move, given what we always talk about, that, hey, look, skill position players aren't going to move the number, quarterbacks can in college, but all of a sudden we're talking about a full field goal in a game that has a pretty modest total in the mid-50s against Georgia?
I think when you're looking at a prominent head coach like Nick Saban and a team that we kind of always feel might be a little overvalued but continues to cash tickets against the spread, I think it was warranted. And to John's point, you don't know what's going to come behind that. Was he in contact with any players, anyone significant going out? Most likely the quarterback potentially. So I think you want to protect yourself there. But I think overall what we saw in that game is there was some sentiment for Alabama at 4 and even some 5 there. But I don't think that line was ever going to stick at 7. And what I was hearing was potentially some buyback there on Georgia at 7. So while John might not have seen it, I think there was some buy there on the Bulldogs when that news started to surface a little bit. And that's partly why we are down to that number. But I don't think a head coach in this situation is obviously worth a full 3 points through some secondary key numbers there of 6 and 4.
Makes a ton of sense. And John, of course, we also saw a COVID potentially impacted scenario take place earlier this morning in the National Football League with the Atlanta Falcons Minnesota Vikings game. Can you kind of explain to us how you guys have gone about that particular game? Did it come off the board? Have you reopened it? What's been the sequence of events there, knowing that Atlanta may or may not be available to play this weekend?
Yeah, I mean, as you say, I think, we basically suspend it when we get the news. Schefter broke it pretty quickly, as he always does, I guess. So we would suspend it off the back of that information and kind of wait until we get, a clearer picture of who it affects and what it affects. I think there's been some positive news since that it may be just one of the coaches and none of the playing staff. So we've put it back on the boards right now with a total of 54.5 that is down from where I think it opened at 56.5. So it's back up, and hopefully that's the end of it, and we're good to go on Sunday.
Payne, I can let you put John's feet to the fire, and you can ask the hard-hitting NFL questions.
There's really not anything hard-hitting. Obviously, the same questions, the ones that our listeners love to hear. And so far, John, you've been delivering better than we have for our listeners at this point. So for NFL Week 6, is there anything you're seeing in terms of potential liability or even some sharp action?
Yeah, I mean, I think liability won't surprise anybody. All the people that have won money fading the Jets are back in with a vengeance this weekend. 95% of the money this morning is already for the Dolphins, up from 8 to 9.5 now. We don't see it and couldn't get it any higher than where it is right now. But I don't see any interest in the Jets whatsoever, even from the local fan base here. So I expect that one to be the most lopsided result we'll have all weekend. In terms of sharp money, we definitely saw plenty of sharp money on Cleveland at 3.5. We're into 3 now. We actually like the other side, but respecting that move, we'll sit at 3 until we see maybe a shift in the market. I think the other one that's really interesting has just come in not long ago, and if people can grab it, is definitely the under in the Carolina game at 54.5, I think, or 44.5, was it? Yeah, 44.5. That's one that I expect to move in the next few hours. So if people can grab it around that number, I wouldn't be surprised to see a bit of information come out of that game and that total drop significantly. So that's probably the sharpest move I've seen. That's I guess most recent.
Makes a lot of sense, and there's 45 out there in the gambling sphere. Todd, do you have anything to follow up with that? I mean, do we think there's potential there? We know some contact tracing there with Davidson having played against the Panthers last week. Do we think that potentially has something to do with this move?
You know, you always wonder, and I know it's a game we broke down earlier in the show, trying to figure out, how good Carolina actually is. I mean, a surprise start at 3-2. I think a lot of our listeners know that we typically refer to the Bears as one of the more fraudulent teams in the league, but it's always that extra time to prepare and what that Bears defense can do against the Carolina side that, will be encountering some resistance. So there's no doubt if there's major news that's breaking and Carolina could be down, impactful skill position talents, it could make it a little bit more of an uphill battle against the Bears. But John, one game in particular I did want to get your take on. We've seen a massive shift in Sunday Night Football between the Rams and 49ers, and we haven't broken down that game on the show yet. It's the last one that we'll get to. But when you look at perception for San Francisco, look ahead number here had the 49ers a field goal favorite. They go out there and get absolutely railroaded by the Miami Dolphins. The Rams, they finished their sweep of the NFC East, and people believe that the greatest thing is since sliced bread. But a 6.5 point move at this point in the year, were you surprised by the strength of that number change?
Absolutely. I mean, I won't lie. Our combined trader price made it 2.5, and that even surprised me a little bit. So we're juiced towards the Niners at 3. But yeah, I think there's a big overreaction here. And I think if you're betting the game, you have to bet San Francisco. I don't see anybody betting the Rams making money long term. Feel like it was the perfect spot for San Fran to have a bit of a letdown. Obviously, Jimmy G's ankle was hurting him. You could see that when he was throwing the ball. I think you got to get a lot of confidence back. The fact that, okay, he mightn't have the best choice in the world, but the fact that we're sticking with him, and Shanahan has come out and said that, and he will start. And I wonder if he's had another week to heal. Is he going to be in a better position physically to be able to throw the ball more effectively? Because we saw some of those throws for the interceptions where, they were 6 feet higher than they needed to be, and that's what ultimately cost them. And then once the game is over, it's a perfect spot for Miami to ram home their advantage, and then it makes San Fran look probably a lot worse than they are. So, I don't think anybody needs to be betting the Rams -3 in this spot.
Payne, I know we're not going to get to the Cowboys-Cardinals, obviously, today. We'll cover it on Monday's podcast. But should we get John's take on what kind of adjustments they've made to the Cowboys without Dak Prescott?
Yeah, absolutely. We're looking at that line right now. I'm not sure where you're sitting, John. Are you guys at 1.5
Yep.
with the Arizona Cardinals favored there? What have you seen so far early on in the week with Arizona and the Dallas Cowboys? We know the adjustment down from Dak to Dalton. What did you guys see there in terms of that movement and potentially anything sharp at this point?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting game. We obviously, when we put the lines up back in May, we had this as a 7-point game for Dallas. Adjusted after 5 weeks, or just before last weekend's game, where obviously Dak got hurt. We were down to 3.5. It swung obviously to being Arizona favored by 2.5, and that's probably a line we would want back. We definitely saw some sharp play +2.5 on Dallas. We're +1.5 now, juiced towards Dallas, given we sat down yesterday and discussed it, and we'd be very surprised if Dallas don't jump off as favorite here on Monday. I think for me, looking at this, taking we're +100. I'm sure there's a little bit bigger out there. Taking plus money on Dallas here will be a positive EV bet come Monday night. We just don't see the downgrades. Obviously, some O-line issues here as well for Dallas. It's not just Dak down to Dalton, but the swing looked far too big in our view as well. So I think if you can get it sooner rather than later, I'd be taking Dallas at any plus money I could get.
It's always interesting, gentlemen. You see the polarizing nature of quarterbacks and exactly what they're worth to the actual number from the odds maker perspective, and how some of the recreational bettors and more sophisticated betting groups try and quantify their edge regardless of matchup. So should be fascinating to see. And of course, if you're looking for a more comprehensive breakdown of the Cardinals and Cowboys, for all our loyal listeners, Payne and I, of course, will deep dive that on Monday along with the Kansas City Chiefs and Buffalo Bills. John, can't thank you enough for your time. Appreciate it. I know our listeners have come to really appreciate the nuggets you've provided week in, week out. And like Payne said, while we've struggled, you've been able there to bring home the bacon for us to tip up a few games here and there. So best of luck this weekend, and we'll look forward to chatting with you same time next week.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
John continues to bring the goods. Payne adds a little bit of context to the Browns-Steelers game and how they view it as part of his group in terms of setting a number there and what some of the expectations are. Always fascinating to try and see bettors matching wits with some of the best bookmakers in the world.
John's been a huge asset to the show. Absolutely love having him on. He's been fantastic, picking a few winners, but more importantly, as always, it's the information. Right, we're never going to be on this show long enough to deliver a large enough sample size. So when you can see the information being dispersed, whether it's through us or John, and the lines moving in his favor with all of these, and he's telling you before it actually happens, there's supreme value in that. I've actually been searching Todd because I know he doesn't like American food. I've been trying to get some food from his homeland shipped to him, but we got to figure that out. It'd be a nice.
We just got to find out if he's a drinker. It's a lot easier to ship a little Irish whiskey to him than it is actual food.
The problem is shipping liquor is very difficult this day and age. I'm not sure if you're aware of this. I tried sending you some of that rubbing vodka that you like, Belvedere.
Here we go.
Couldn't get it shipped to you.
Well, I mean, the last time I shipped liquor, honestly, was right around the holidays last year, so I have to see if it's that much more difficult in 2020 than what it was last year. But I did find a spot, and I don't remember
I'm
what
a law-abiding citizen, so, I'm not going to just go into the local spot, buy liquor, and ship it across the country.
I didn't go into the local bodega and brown bag it and send an MD 2020 across the country, if that's what you think I'm doing, you ass. I went through a third party, found it online. It was, Liquor Barn, Liquor World, Liquor this, or I don't know what the hell it was. And, found a way to send...
Getting a little crazy there. We don't need to know about what you like to do in other places.
Found a way to send a couple nice bottles of scotch and pay my debt to society. So I'll have to poke around, see if I can find those sites. But, it's a perfect opportunity. If anybody out there owns a micro distillery or micro brewery and they want to sponsor this podcast, hey, we're happy to promote whatever liquor you want to sell, as long as it's not swill.
There you go.
I'm not above a shameless plug or promotion. What do you want from me? All right,
what are we even talking about here?
We got one game left. You
frazzled me. The college football game is off the board.
We got one game left.
What are we talking about? We got the Sunday night game.
Yeah, and it's not Thursday night football. We got a little Rams-Niners action. And let's see, since I got sidetracked, pull up the most recent number from FanDuel. And we're looking at the Rams, a 3-point road favorite. You do have to lay $1.15. Total on the game sits at 51.5. And there's no doubt, Payne, that the Rams have been outstanding versus the division. 9-3 straight up, 9-3 against the spread, the last 12 versus the NFC West. The Rams have turned their initial possession into points 12 times in 18 NFC West games under Sean McVay, and that includes 3 touchdowns and 3 field goals last season. But you look at the Rams' record so far this year. Yes, they're 4-1, but guess what? Being champions of the NFC East, that won't get you all that much cachet or street cred, at least for me early on. But 49ers on the other side, this team is clearly reeling, trying to figure out what their identity is going to be. With a number of key contributors have been injured. But Payne, I was blown away when I dug into the 49ers for this game and I looked at their schedule. Yikes. I mean, if they theoretically...
Buzz's girlfriend.
If they theoretically weren't to win on Sunday night, I mean, it doesn't get any easier. At the Patriots, at the Seahawks, Packers, Thursday Night Football, at the Saints, bye week, at the Rams, Bills on Monday Night Football. Little to say, the 49ers need a bounce-back effort. Can we see it from their defense against this high-flying Los Angeles Rams offense?
Listen, these are fun matchups from the perspective that we have 2 head coaches in Sean McVay and Kyle Shanahan that are buddies, that have coached together, and are, let's call them offensive trendsetters. And watching them try to outduel one another is probably, appointment television. But I think John hit this perfectly. And we can dig into some of the matchups, but the price in any game is what matters most. And that's the very large hurdle, you'll have to overcome if you're thinking about laying it with Los Angeles here. This is a game that over the summer, San Francisco is a touchdown favorite. Even last week, the 49ers were a 3-point favorite. Jimmy G was a full go at practice on Wednesday. So we have this 6.5-point adjustment through 1-3 and on to the other 3. And I know there's a lot of new listeners and so many new people are getting into sports betting, and that's awesome. sometimes those new bettors look at things in a vacuum and they strictly gauge things on wins and losses, and that isn't the way to go about this. So, sure, the Rams could cover here, but nobody on planet Earth that is sophisticated doing this is making a 6.5-point adjustment week over week. So long term, you're investing into a market here that's moved this much after a single, additional data point. It's going to be tough to earn. So this is really clearly 49ers or pass. And Todd, you mentioned this a little bit here, and I get neither of these teams have beaten anybody. All 4 of the Rams wins, as you kind of mentioned there, NFC East teams who are combined 4-15-1. And that's a very flattering 4-15-1, if you can believe it, right? You have this ridiculous onside kick that the Cowboys pick up to win that game against Atlanta. Dallas beat New York last week. Pretty good chance somebody had to earn that win there. And same thing with Washington, right? Their win comes against Philadelphia. Somebody was going to earn that win in the NFC. So there really isn't much going on here right now with the Rams in terms of their strength of schedule. San Francisco, same thing. They've beaten two of the winless New York teams. That's it. So I think we're going to find out a lot about these two teams, but the price is what matters most here. We can dig into some of the matchups here quickly. Where would you like to lead us?
I'd like to ask you about the Rams.
Offensively?
Particularly the offense. We know that running the football has been the key to what this team wants to do. But they had a pretty low success rate against the Washington defensive front last week. And when you look at Jared Goff, I know he's thrown for 250-plus yards in 4 or 5 games. For me, Payne, from an efficiency standpoint, it doesn't feel the Rams have been that good, despite what the stat sheet is telling me.
It's really interesting to watch because I actually think, off the top of my head here, they're the most efficient rushing offense, but they're not very explosive with it. When you're looking at the Rams, they basically live in 11 formation. 72% of their offensive snaps are from 3 wide sets, so they're going to stretch your secondary. We know that's where the 49ers are struggling a little bit, especially with some injuries. The secondary isn't quite as strong as it was a season ago. You obviously lost Joe Woods, your defensive secondary coach, so that's hurt a touch as well. So the 49ers are basically getting killed out wide. And now it's a different type of receiver this week, right? Preston Williams, Devontae Parker are bona fide outside receivers that can go up, get the ball. The Rams offense doesn't quite have that. They're going to beat you in another manner, right? It's going to be more of that motion, that sophistication of getting guys open through the concepts. They're not these, I wouldn't call them elite number ones, but they're perfect for Sean McVay's system. So it's a different type of matchup for that 49ers secondary. And if you're looking at San Fran right now, they face the second easiest schedule of offenses. Again, the only 2 wins were against the New York teams who have offensive efficiency rankings of 28 and 32nd. If you look, despite having the most efficient run game, the Rams to this point, and maybe this is why you're not completely sold on them, is they've been average in the red zone. And that's the one spot where you're like, hey, you actually need to be able to run the ball. They just haven't been very good in the red zone. The 49ers defense still have the number 1 red zone defense despite all the injuries. So that's one thing to look for here. If the Rams are driving the ball, if the 49ers have to bend here, just don't break. The other thing that's always key is getting pressure on Goff. That is always going to be the recipe to beating the Rams, to stifling that offense. Now, it's tougher with a slew of injuries to the 49ers defensive line, but oddly, despite those injuries, the 49ers defense still getting pressure on the quarterback at the 3rd highest rate. And you're looking at Goff, obviously he melts under pressure, 48 passer rating and an adjusted completion percentage of 55%, 2 picks as well under pressure. So that's going to be the key for the 49ers defense. They're not the unit we think they are. They're not the unit that they were last year after losing their secondary coach and having a slew of injuries. The key to this side of the ball for the 49ers is you got to get pressure on Goff and you got to hold the 3 when the Rams inevitably get to your red zone. That's the way they stay in this game on this side of the ball.
And at least for the 49ers, they should have some reinforcements in their secondary. It looks like Emmanuel Mosley is slated to return, hasn't played since suffering concussion week 3, and the 49ers need all the help they can get on the back end. The one thing I did want to ask you about, though, Payne, we know that the Dolphins were able to exploit that 49ers secondary with deep threats in Devontae Parker and Preston Williams. when you look at the way the Rams run their offense, do they have the same kind of receiving threats that can put as much stress on the 49ers if they're operating underneath in a narrow window?
That's exactly what I kind of mentioned there. They don't. I think Miami's receiving core doesn't get the accolades they deserve. Preston Williams and Devontae Parker, when both are healthy, are premium outside receivers. They have speed. They have the large catch radius. They can go up and get the ball. They're sound route runners. They can run after the catch. They're really two of the more elite young receivers. Devontae just hasn't proven it as much as you would like because he was battling some injuries. He's now getting the body healthy. He's recovering well. He's putting the right things in his system. And sure enough, he's had a fantastic year last year. On track to have another ridiculous season this year. Preston Williams, an absolute beast despite still recovering from the ACL injury. But Cooper Kupp, Roberts, not going to be confused for those two guys. It's more about scheme. And that's kind of why I've said from the onset this season that McVay's been fantastic. What he's doing with pre-snap motion, what he's doing with play action. Goff still throwing with play action at the highest rate in the league right now among qualifying quarterbacks. It's more scheme oriented in terms of production from the wide receiver group for the Rams. So it's going to be a different style, that's for sure. Now, Kyle Shanahan's certainly going to help with the defensive game plan this week. He knows McVay. They know each other very well. They've spent time. At this point, they're division mates. They play each other 2 times a year. These offenses know, or the defenses know what the offenses want to do. But, you hit this spot on. It is a different type of receiver that they're going to go against this week. Your hope is that you fare a little bit better, that Witherspoon, is a little bit healthier this week, kind of battled out there last week, but it'd be another nice addition if he was healthier this week to that 49er secondary.
Other side of the ball, the 49ers offense clearly struggled in the first half against the Finns. Jimmy Garoppolo, 7 of 17 for 77 yards and 2 picks before he was pulled. We know he wasn't quite 100%. And when you look at the 49ers, you have a quarterback that's banged up. It's never a good recipe that only 3 teams in the league have allowed more sacks than the Niners, that being the Philadelphia Eagles and 2 teams right now towards the bottom of the barrel as well in the Washington football team and the Cincinnati Bengals. 5 sacks a week ago, 8 quarterback hits. But with the 49ers, the key to the success that they've experienced has always been about getting the ground game going. And you brought it up before we jumped on the show. Raheem Mostert just didn't have the opportunity for ample touches, but when he did, he was electric in space. How important is it for the 49ers to play with a lead in this game so they don't have to abandon a ground mentality?
So I think one thing that's real positive here in terms of the pressure, certainly the 49ers offensive line in terms of pass protection hasn't played to the level that we've kind of grown accustomed to, even with bringing Trent Williams in. But despite having a Jimmy G that wasn't 100% last week, if you look at when Jimmy G is under center, he's only been pressured on 29% of his dropbacks. A lot of the pressure has come against the Nick Mullins, the CJ Beathards, in known passing situations. Mullins runs a ton of play action. So it's not the same in terms of pressure rate allowed when it's Jimmy G. Now, the positive here is he practiced in full on Wednesday. I hinted at this on Monday that him getting benched wasn't to do with production. It was to keep him healthy. It was to, really support him. I think you don't want a setback knowing how important this game is at 2-3 going against a team that's 4-1 in your own division. You lose this one, it's a tough road back. So with the scoreboard lopsided like that and knowing the offensive line has been giving up some pressures and he's not 100%, Shanahan removed him to protect himself. But you're looking right now, we're hoping that this full practice on Wednesday, which none of us truly expected, I thought maybe a full practice on Thursday, seeing that on Wednesday was big. And you could just tell he wasn't really moving his feet last week, wasn't stepping into throws. Basically, he was throwing with his feet glued to the ground if you go back and watch. So I think that's a positive. The other thing that's going to be really key here is we know the 49ers are a run offense. Kyle Shanahan wants to get that ground game going. And I'm not really sure what the Rams defense is at this point. They've faced one bona fide decent offense in the Buffalo Bills, and Buffalo went up and down the field on them. Now, I get it was a tough spot, but that's the only offense they've faced that is of somewhat this caliber when the 49ers are at least healthy. So I think that's going to be something to look for is, can the 49ers offense get the ball moving on the ground? They're 6th still in rushing efficiency. The Rams are weak in that area, 24th in defensive rush efficiency. And you mentioned this last week. Raheem Mostert goes for 8.2 a carry. Just the game flow isn't there for him to have an increased workload there. Even Jeff Wilson, shade under 7 yards a carry. But because you're playing catch-up, you're forced to play unbalanced football. So I think from the onset here, we're going to see a heavy dose of the ground game. I think Jimmy G is going to be a little bit healthier this week. You'll know right away if he's stepping into throws or not. But I do think that the 49ers are going to have some offensive success here, Todd.
Should be an interesting game as the 49ers season continues to hang in the balance. As we talked about on Monday, this was one of the biggest shifts in terms of look-ahead lines, and we got John's perspective on the game as well. Easy for me to say. All things flow into what should be must-see TV this Sunday evening. All right, Payne, 4 games broken down as eloquently and extensively as we know how to do around these parts. And folks can follow you on Twitter at Payne Insider. They can follow me on Twitter as well at Todd Furman. And of course, most importantly, follow the podcast at Bet the Board Pod. Best bet time. Where are we going, my friend, to try and find a money-making opportunity this Sunday in the National Football League?
Not the prettiest of games here, Todd. But we have at least a nice little situation here that I don't think is being at least factored into the number. In terms of value, we're getting that all-important hook on a key number. We made this game Tennessee -3, so I have no problem taking Houston +3.5 here. This is effectively the Texans season at 1-4. You can't go to 1-5 and have the Titans go to 5-0. We also have a Titans team that just played on Tuesday night, one of those rare situations. So I think there's a lot of value in that element of this. The Houston Texans, if you've kind of done some reading on this, the way they ousted Bill O'Brien, it's now on the players to produce. They've put that on themselves. So I think we have a basic rebuy-in here from the Houston Texans at this point. And again, this is their season. Value in the number as well. Great situational spot. Along with that, with the Titans playing late Tuesday night. So not a lot of time for rest and recovery there. Let's go with the Texans rather. Rotation number 257. Texans +3.5 is the best bet this week.
Deshaun Watson, baby. Go out there and prove your worth with that lofty contract and make us some money. Hopefully they're able to get there outright at Nissan Field on Sunday. All right, Payne, another week is in the books, unfortunately, with a college football cancellation. We should have some interesting games to watch in the professional ranks on Sunday. Do you have any words of wisdom, life advice to keep our listeners out of trouble until we reconvene on Monday?
I don't. Just don't buy liquor at your local grocer and then ship it across the country.
They do, if you go into, the USPS, they make you click that little box. Do you have any flammable liquids or anything else along those lines? So it's strongly frowned upon, that type of behavior. There are better ways to send liquor coast to coast.
FedEx also interrogates you now. What are you shipping? How much is in it? What's it worth?
Why do you have to go to FedEx, Payne?
I have no idea. I just like FedEx better. It's closer, I think.
It's all the holiday gifts and the reliability. I know you're looking out for all your family, friends, and loved ones.
If you have to buy your FedEx driver's illegitimate child a Christmas gift, I think that's when you know you've made it as a professional bettor.
And for those folks out there who aren't sure what the hell we're talking about, ask your friends, ask your family. They'll hopefully be able to fill you in because we're not about to expand or elaborate on any of those particular references. Follow Payne on Twitter at Payne Insider. I'm Todd Furman. Follow me there as well. Follow the podcast at Bet the Board Pod, and you can also follow our weekly Thursday contributor John Sheeran at J Sheeran SHEERHAN1981 there as well. Sunday afternoon with the Houston Texans ticket in hand. Hopefully we'll see you at the window.
Thanks for listening to Bet the Board. You can catch Todd and Payne every Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday during football season, breaking down the biggest NFL and college football games. And to make sure you don't miss any free best bets, subscribe to Bet the Board on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts.